Welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Alethia. I am your host, Alethia O'Hara-Stephenson. In this show, I sit down with amazing community leaders who are doing inspiring and incredible things in our community. The show will educate, it will empower, and it will inspire you. This episode, I am honored to have an amazing community icon, a legend in his own right. He is a civil rights movement activist, a community leader, youth empowerment and development leader, a legacy builder. This is the one and only Ken Jeffers. My bio does not do him justice, so I'm going to invite him on to come on stage and just share a little bit about his background. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, how are you doing, first of all?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I am, sort of a little bit homebound, which is not my preference right now, but it's a sign of the times,
Right.
But I am not absolutely restricted, unlimited. Freedom is something that I treasure. So I do move with caution and protection. So yes, thanks for asking.
Wonderful. So I know you have a very rich history, and I know you have a Trinidadian roots. And when we had our pre-conversation, you spoke fondly of your father and the legacy that he built and left behind, and how that has shaped you. Can you touch on that a little bit and just give the audience a sense of young Ken and that legacy that Dad established in Trinidad?
Well, it was my dad, in addition to my dad's dad and so forth, my family basically, right? My background has been one that's, for me, is very inspiring. And I must say that it's when I got a little bit into my early teens and started to understand my family background, and I really mean understand, it inspired me a lot. And by that, I mean my grandfather was one of the first Black lawyers who organized and established a legal firm. Henry Israel Jeffers was his name. And, my father's article to him as a lawyer as well. And he made a commitment, and this is what I heard when I was a young, he made a commitment that he would only allow, and I use the word allow, Black people to be articled as lawyers and as solicitors in his firm. And that's because he also had a really troubling experience as a young man, in the UK and so on, right? And so yes, so he that was his commitment. And my aunt is, as I said, this is an icon. She's her name is Audrey Jeffers, and they're doing a course on her, I understand, at the university because of her contribution to, again, starting breakfast programs, women's rights, and she became one of the first legislators and also the first envoy for West Africa in the Caribbean.
Wow.
So, and then my cousin Tony was a professor. He's passed away. And Tony Martin, he is a strong Garveyite. He interviewed all the Garveys, wives, and I say wives, which is true. And he's very well known as a professor, was a professor at Brown University in African Studies. All over the world, and reconnected with quite a bit here when he came to Toronto and elsewhere.
Perfect.
And I went to a high school called Queen's Royal College, which is a bit of the old colonial days. It's exactly like Upper Canada College. I think it was almost the same architect actually, and it was really the old colonial tradition of Queen's Royal and Upper Canada and all that kind of stuff. And I resented some of that, which I can talk to you about another time. But it was, the Black middle class family and all that goes with it. And my sense of unfairness and inequity as a young kid playing cricket. And I don't know if you want to hear about that experience, but I felt that it was important that those who were poor and physically Black like myself were discriminated against But because of, as I said, because of the middle class background, that minimized some of it, not eradicate, minimize.
Right.
In the Caribbean, it was very, very, very rigidly colonial, and the color of your skin determined, in a lot of ways, your future. But fortunately, as I said, for me, we came from a strong middle class family, and that helped.
So I wonder, could you touch a little bit on how you talked about the rich history and the impact of your aunt and your uncle, your dad, granddad? How has that shaped you into the individual that you are today? And I know we're going to touch a little bit later on your transition from Trinidad to the States on a track scholarship. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. But how has that history shaped the Ken that we see today?
Well, in many ways, because I should have also mentioned my mother was a very strong maternal. I mean, she ruled, right? My mother is very strong Roman Catholic, but in terms of that, she had some high standards of education. Six of us had, it's five siblings, so six of us, and we all are university educated at least, and that was her insistence. I mean, there was no compromise there. So what I'm saying though is that you asked me what motivated me in a way, right? And I remember clearly when I was at Queen's Royal College, I was a pretty good cricketer, played cricket and ran track and so forth. And I was a captain of a team, 14 years old. We had this cricket league, and we had to call them masters, right? We had this master. I wouldn't call his name because he has connections. He passed away, but he has connections here. And this master selected the team. I was the captain, and he said, and there was this particular person on the team who came from a poor area, and he didn't dress very well because he didn't have means, right?
Right.
And he was an excellent cricketer, and he was not selected on the team. So I was 14 years old. I went to the master, the black man, and he was a black man too, of course. He happened to be, because we had white masters too. So what happened is I said to him, why isn't he on the team? He said, and he wouldn't answer me. And I said, that's not fair. And I said, long and short, I said, if he's not playing, after a couple of meetings with him, and he was not relenting, I said, if he's not playing, I'm not going to play. And he told me, sure, you don't have to play. And that got me even more angry. So I got some of the three top players on the team, finally convinced them that we'll go as a group and tell him that we're not going to play if this particular individual was not selected. And when I went with him, he was very angry, but he realized that if he did not select this person,
right.
And they were scared. They're saying, Ken, I don't know, you better do all the talking and all that kind of. I said, no problem. And I did that. And he relented.
At 14 years old.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And I said, you know what? That means that, when we come together, we can really make things happen. And so it happened. It was very impacting on me with that example,
Wow. So that is just one example of how, your family has shaped you. I want to touch on, I know we're running out of time already, this could be a 2-hour episode, but I want to touch on a critical point in your young years, I should say your teenage years, right? You received a track scholarship to go to South Carolina, and, you experienced something profound there. Can you share a little bit about that journey, about your time in Orange, is it Orange County?
No, it's Orangeburg.
Orangeburg, correct.
Orangeburg, South Carolina.
Yes.
South Carolina State College. As a matter of fact, Senator Clyburn was around the same time. But in any way, I got a track scholarship to go to South Carolina. In fact, it was uncanny because I was offered 3 scholarships, Louisiana and I believe somewhere else, and it was all in the South. And I was wondering if this is where I wanted to go. However, I went to South Carolina State College in Orangeburg, and when I got there, there were signs for no black, no Negroes allowed, for white only. Blew me away, right? And and so when I was doing a lot of training and so on and so forth, and I had this this roommate who was about 7 foot tall, actually. And he was sort of overpowering, and he used to talk to me, and he called me Trin, right? And so we talked. And one day, this guy burst into the room and said, "We're going downtown to integrate the bowling alley because the bowling alley had no niggers allowed." That was the sign, right?
Right.
So all the football players were going down, and he said, "Let's go." I said, "Sure, I'm going." So we went down to the bowling alley, and we had picket signs and what have you. And there was this white student from South Carolina, and he said, "Look, I'm going to set him up. I'll go into bowl and say I want to bring my friends in," and he did that. He went through the door, and the guy let him in, and he said, "I have some friends." He said, "Sure." And when he looked out and he saw all of these black people, he freaked out and he said, "No," and he pushed them out of the door, and that's when all hell broke loose. And so my roommate and I and a few others, we started, they brought out the fire trucks and the police, and people were getting beaten and all that. And I said, "Oh, that." And I remember some very graphic examples of the beatings that were going on. And I was right in the middle of the crowd, and this cop was coming at me and so forth. So we all right. They said, "Let's head back to the campus." I hope I'm covered by the statute of limitations by saying this, but we were going back to the campus, and we started to overturn cars and break windows. We were angry, and it was really crazy. And when we got back into the campus, of course, that's when it started. We said we wanted to go meet in the hall, and the head of the South Carolina state said, "No, you can't do that." We said, "We'll break the door down."
Wow.
And he opened the door, and we had this meeting there, and we decided that we were going to protest in the city, and it all started. And my friend, we used to burn bonfires for the next few nights out at the edge of the campus where my dorm was, and sing soul songs around and the cops, they call them State Law Enforcement Division, SLED officers with the guns every night there in the air, right?
Right.
And I was going out there. We were sort of taunting them and singing our songs. And I got very ill. It never happened to me before. And my mother said I was her prayers. And I was right in the room, and someone said, Smithy came in my room, my friend, and he said he wanted his knife. I said, "What are you going to do with a knife? Because these guys have guns." He said, No, Trin, I'm going, to protect myself and our people. So he goes out there, and I'm sick in this blanket waiting. And then someone says, "Ken, come and see what's going on." When I looked, I saw the officers were getting very, anxious. It looked like. And Smithy threw something on a Coca-Cola sign, or some sign, and it broke, and one of the splinters cut the guy in his face. It's a small cut. And he said, this is what I was told.
Wow.
"Let's kill those niggers." And they started shooting at all the students. And I came out on the steps, and I didn't realize what was going on. Many things happened, which of course we can't, don't have the time to get into. But I was very angry because when I was on the steps of Lumen Hall, which is now, I understand, a historic place, dorm. When I was in the steps there, when I heard the bullets, they were pushing around my, and somebody said, "Hit the ground." And I hit the ground, and there was this high school kid. I didn't know him very well. All I knew, he used to come up to the stadium, and he was a very good young football player. He was about 16 years old at the time, or 15. And he was I would say about 30 yards away. And I saw him got shot in his neck. I saw this blood. And that really came out. And then someone said, "Go back into the dorm, go back into the dorm." And we crawled back in. And I remember standing, because some of it gets a little hazy. I remember standing there extremely angry and telling them, the folks there, that let's go and people are dying out there. Let's go put them in the ambulance. And the ambulance refused to come on campus because they said that we were shooting at them, which was a lie. And I got, let me put it this way, I heard that, and I say because it gets really fuzzy, it was really in a state of anger I've never experienced. And I said, let's go and get them. And they were holding me back. And because then somebody came in and said, Smitty, he's dead. I said, no. He said, yes, Smitty is dead. Because he got to the hospital and apparently he was calling for his mom and so forth and prayers. He was a very, very religious guy.
Right.
And you know, according to some what I was told, they took their time, as I said. So I just I lost it quite a bit. And my roommate, who was Smitty's very good friend, because Smitty was, as I said, just an hour before or whatever. And he brought 4 or 5 of us in our room. And he said, we've got to take some revenge. And I said, well, what do you want us to do? What should we do? He said, there was this guy white guy who comes to change the machine every morning. You know, the pop machine. You're gonna have to take him out. What that meant for me at the time, and I said, you know, because you know, violence is very intoxicating.
Yes.
And it really is. Unless you're there, you wouldn't, you know, really, you know, get the full impact of it. And without thinking, 6 of us sat there waiting till in the morning for this guy. I didn't know what was going to happen. And people had assorted things in their hands, which I won't go into right now, waiting on it. He never did come, which was the grace of God, because I don't know what would have happened. And then someone said later on, you know, with all the, you know, it was really, you know, you could smell the gun smoke in the air and all that. Some people thought some of us were hit, right? And, you know, it was a lot of panic and people wanted to go home from the campus. And you're calling and saying, Mom, I want my gun. And I mean, this is the first time I really saw all of that, right? And then the football player came into the room. He said, all of the athletes have decided we're going to run to Columbia to protest. Are you ready? Are you going to come? I said, yes. I was injured. My knee, I had a bad knee. Well, I got injured, my hamstring. And I said, you know what? I'm going anyway. And that is how we decided to go. And then we got a call that the KKK had heard that, you know, we were going to do this. I don't know how true that was, but I said, you know, we all going. Some people, the coach came into my room, one of the coaches, he said, that's not on my training schedule. So if you go there, you sacrifice the scholarship. And I said, well, you know what? You can keep the scholarship. I'm going. And so we left that morning at 3 o'clock. It ended up with 6 of us because a lot of the football players at back, you know, were scared to go. And some of the athletes. It ended up with 6 of us. And we left at 3 in the morning. We called the cops. I called the cops to say we're on a training mission, because what happened is the KKK usually comes out of that, you know, so we started running at 3 in the morning, and this coach came in and he said he's going to drop us to the median highway. And he did, basketball coach. And 6 of us started running. And the guy in front, like Sam, who finally played for the New York Yankees, he came and he said, he was in the front, and he said, look, if you see cars slowing down, just move to the woods, because it could be the KKK. And so we started running, and this car slowed down. And, you know, and the person shouted, where are you going? You know, stop. And he said, no. And when the thing that the defining moment for me is when he said, they can't get all of us. In other words, they can't shoot all of us.
Right.
So let's split, because there were woods on either side, right? I said, and that's when it dawned on me that I could be dead in South Carolina, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was. But anyhow, the long and short of it is that it turned out to be a brother. And he was so emotional. I remember him putting his hand in his pocket, taking out money, and he's crying and saying, because he had heard it on the news, you know, that we were going to run and all that. And so that was quite an experience. You know.
How long did you run for? How long was the?
Around 40 miles.
40 miles.
40 miles to the state capital, Columbia. And, you know, what was one of the greatest moments in my life, is that when we started, you know, when the sun started coming up, because we had called, actually, Stokely Carmichael, the Black Panthers had called because they were giving us money to pay for the buses for the students to go. The Panthers and a group called SNCC, which was Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. And Martin Luther King called, according to what I heard, our group. And there's a sister. She was not easy, man.
Mm-hmm.
She said to him, "You're an Uncle Tom." She said, "We don't want peace." This is what I was told when he called and he spoke to her. He said, "We're coming to bring people to help you." She said, "No, we want guns, right? We don't want peace." I mean, you got to remember at that time it was, the anger was incredible, and
Right. Understandable.
yeah. And when I got, but as I said, one of the, not going into any more details. Once we got into the state capitol, the streets were lined with Black people, kids coming from school, and everybody was there. All of the major networks, NBC, and I was advised not to talk to the networks because of my accent, and then they would want to. You never know, right? They say, "Well, you're not from America," and all of that stuff. I said no. So when we got in and the sun was coming up, you're going to South Carolina. I can remember seeing the skyline, and I got so energized. 6 of us, and we started running in, and the people were cheering and singing, and it was quite an experience. And the streets were lined, and as I got to the state capitol, all I remember, there were the National Guard was there, and the guy pointed a gun in my face. All I remember, he said, "Not another step," right? And the crowd started to surge. Well, it wasn't only me, right? For all of us, right? And the crowd started to surge. And as the crowd was surging, they said, "Don't touch him," and so on and so forth. Because I was just laying on the ground. And all I remember, all these friendly Black hands just, and anyway, long and short of it is that he backed away. They backed away, the National Guard. And I remember being taken into this truck. And when I got back to the campus, my coach said, "I expect to see you at the stadium to train this out, later on today."
Wow.
But you were not allowed to go there. And what happened is that, the head coach called me and said, "Did Coach Burden talk to you like that?" He said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. And Coach Burden, I will deal with him." Oh, I called his name, but Coach Burden, I will deal with him. And don't you worry, you could never lose this call. And he was giving me a lot of stuff, And I went down to the campus, actually, the stadium, and I had told some of the brothers and sisters, and they all walked with me that day to tell Coach Burden, But I won't go through the details.
Yeah,
so I did that.
That is an incredible journey. And, one of the things that I'm hearing, this all started about, fighting for your rights, fighting for freedom. And it started with unity, not just with the Black community in South Carolina, but you had that white student who was there fighting for freedom as well, fighting for you at the same time, started with that bowling alley. So that's an incredible journey. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that 40 years later, Royce and James from the Toronto Star called me because I saw there was going to be an anniversary. I just like that. And I can't remember where I saw it in the paper, and I called, and so I decided that I was thinking of going down, but I hadn't resolved it within myself, right? But I was extremely angry. And Royce and James, as I said, called me, and he said, "Ken, we will go with you, the Toronto Star, for the 40th anniversary." I got to tell you, that was quite an experience going back there 40 years later. Because, Bakari Sellers,
yes,
his father, Cleveland, was one of the leaders.
Incredible.
And I was very angry with him because when the violence started, I didn't see him. And I remember getting angry, but I resolved all of that because it wasn't true. He was doing a lot of work, right? And he got arrested. I didn't know that, and so on and so forth. And we went down to the state legislature after that, and we went up, and they were talking about the price of corn, Governor McNair. And some of us were in the balcony because and we said, "What about the brothers you murdered?" And he said, "Get those people," meaning us. And we just ran. We ran into the cars and got out. Right, because they sent the police for us, right? But we went back to the campus. It was quite an experience. There's a lot more to it than that. In terms of having gone to Tallahassee and I was one of the spokespeople for about what happened, and that was another incredible experience. I'll tell you another time.
Yes. This sounds like it has been an amazing journey and experience. And I think that, we can do a whole other episode talking about your experience, not just in the States, but all of the great work that you have done in Canada here. We didn't even get a chance to touch on the great things that you did. You built the Harriet Tubman Center, right? Building the Afrocentric school. So all of these amazing accomplishments and legacy that you've established in Canada, we didn't even get a chance to touch on. So
next time, that's right.
Yeah, we'll save it for next time, next episode. So once again, we're at the end of our show. I want to thank you so much, Ken, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to have this conversation with me, to share your rich history and the legacy that you inherited from your family and now creating your own legacy. So thank you once again for joining us on In Conversation with Alethia. This has been an incredible journey with the one and only Ken Jeffers. Thank you so much and see you next time.